Welcome to the show, Taylor.
Hi, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming on. So, my favorite question to start with is what's your sober date?
September 23rd, 2019.
Okay, congrats. You just celebrated 5 years then.
Yeah, yeah, just a few, or yeah, about a month and a half ago now. Yeah.
Yeah. What
hmm
was going on September 22nd of 2019?
Well, that's like the day I'm from Kansas, so I came out to California to get sober. So that's the day I was flying out to California to check into detox. Um, but I was like living in and out of like hotel rooms in my car, and a friend of mine who had stayed sober because I've like tried to get sober before. Had reached out, just offering me an opportunity to go to detox. And he hit me up at a moment when life really sucked. So I finally said yeah. And so, yeah, it was pretty rough though. I was actually doing decent though, because I was in a hotel at that time, because I was mainly living in my car there towards the end. So I was like kind of living some luxury life, but just super broken,
I
like
flew out
internally.
to LA to get sober too.
Oh yeah, right on. I got sober in Orange County, but right. I mean, we're right next to each other, so yeah.
Yeah, I was in like Santa Monica, Venice area.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'm in like the like Huntington Beach area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, is that your first rehab?
No, I'd done like a couple state facilities in Kansas. But I would go for like a couple days, and then leave. And then in 2016, I came out to California. That was like my first like real like where I stayed the full 30 days. I did the IOP, so I did like 4 months of treatment. I was still my parents' insurance in because I was a little younger, and kind of like wrote out that. And then I did like 3 months in sober living, and then if then I dipped and went back home and started getting loaded again pretty much instantly. So
Getting loaded is such a California thing to say.
yeah, I know whenever I go visit, everyone says the same thing. Yeah.
So you're
Mhm.
from Kansas originally?
Yeah, born and raised.
Any brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I have an older brother. He's like 6 years older than me, about five and a half, you'd say. And then that's it. So just an older brother, and then I have like a niece and nephew. But just a pretty small family outside of that. hmm
No, were your parents addicts at all?
No, I mean there was like a lot of drinking growing up, but I mean I'm sure there was times where it was like abused, but nobody was really like an alcoholic or anything like that. But it was definitely like a huge part of my life growing up. Like my parents would go to the bar a lot, or like they drink at home a lot, but they like maintained employment and like jobs, and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
my parents divorced when I was 15, but then they kept dating after that. So we'd move in and out of my dad's house kind of periodically throughout high school and stuff. So it was like a little bit unstable, but more on like just like the emotional end, just because of their relationship and stuff.
Now, what did you discover first, drugs or alcohol?
You know, the first I remember alcohol first, but it was like right when alcohol made a introduction into my life, drugs quickly followed. I was just like really attracted to the lifestyle right off the bat. So it was like, this is fun. I wonder how fun this is. And so I just the next thing and the next thing. So it was very quickly progressive for me.
Well, walk me through that because I like hearing about, how old were you when you first got alcohol?
I was probably like 14. I like grew up out in the country. So I really had to work for this. So I would like it started like sneaking out, and gosh, I was like in some like dude's basement, like drinking like a lukewarm Bud Light. I didn't get like super drunk the first time I drank or anything like that, but um, then we sneak out again and there's like weed, and then we sneak out again and there's like Xanax or Oxy, like opiates are my drug of choice.
Me too.
So yeah, by far, so gosh, by the time I was 15 and in high school, I just remember like gosh, snorting like the big blue Watson Lore tabs in the bathroom, like it just like so quickly progressed. Um, yeah, I just really liked before that I was like a big like church kid, like I was like, you don't miss school, you don't do anything wrong. And like I started high school and I started like doing like a couple things here and there that I knew I wasn't supposed to and like getting away with it and like the thrill of it. Um, I just like fell in love with that. And then drugs were just right there, made it even more fun. So
Do you think it had anything to do with your parents splitting up and then being like, okay, well now I can get away with shit?
Um, I would say that, but my parents still talk. So I was like grounded basically all through high school. I worked full time at the Pizza Hut and I would just lie about how late I worked. Um, it did help when they were broken up because they didn't talk as much, but that was only like a few months here and a few months there. So, and I did have a lot of freedom though, because like we'd move out and then my mom would start dating my dad. And then like I would basically have this like place to myself while they were like at the beginning of them starting to date again before we would move back in with them. So I guess I'd be grounded, but I did have like moments where I had like barely any supervision, I guess. But yeah, so probably, just like a chaotic life like at home, something out of my control and like drugs and alcohol were something I could control.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And how much did you like Xanax when you first tried that?
I was never a huge Xanax fan because I always blacked out and did something stupid that I had to say sorry for. So, so I was like,
You're absolutely right. That sounds like Xanax.
yeah. So I was never like a huge, but if it was free, I was doing it,
Yeah.
I always like whenever I do panels and stuff, I always share like like if I can choose, like opiates are my drug of choice, but the reality is my drug of choice is whatever's free. Uh,
I always
so,
say, I always say I'm not sure which fellowship you go to.
mm-hmm,
I go to NA, and I identify as an alcoholic and an addict um,
mm-hmm.
whenever I share. But I always say that my drug of choice was the word more.
Yeah, there you go.
That was my drug of choice. It was more whatever's filling that void.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, I do Alcoholics Anonymous, but whatever. I mean, whatever 12-step programs prominent in the area, I'm down for. So,
Well, NA isn't big in my area. AA
mhm.
is.
Oh, really?
And I had a relapse last year
Mm-hmm.
with weed and benzos,
Oh, okay.
and that went on until April. And then I
Mm-hmm.
got back into AA. So, like, AA in Southern California is different than AA in
Mm-hmm.
conservative Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
AA, you can talk about drugs openly in meetings
Mm-hmm.
in California. They don't want to hear it in AA in Pennsylvania where I live.
Yeah.
So when I had my relapse, I went back into AA, figuring this is what I know I need to do is go back into the program. And I
Mm-hmm.
started going every day. And then like I was noticing that I was shutting myself off from talking because if I
Mm-hmm.
was having a bad day, it was hard for me to relate to alcohol. You know,
Okay.
because I haven't had a drink in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I have used weed and I have relapsed with snorting Valium. And these old timers don't want to hear me talk about snorting Valium in a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to in NA, I can talk about that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
but there's no NA around here. So I found a Zoom meeting that's based out of Rhode Island, and I do that every day at noon.
Yeah, we're super blessed out here because I'm from, like being from Kansas, like there is, I would say like a big uproar in meetings, but it's primarily Narcotics Anonymous. Whenever I go back home, like if I go home and I'm visiting, normally I had an NA meeting with some of my friends or whatever. But yeah, it is a lot different out here. Very, I mean, you can find people who aren't as inclusive, but for the most part, just all we want to do is get sober. Who cares what you did or how you did it or how much of it, you know what I mean? Like all that matters is what we're working towards. And I feel like sometimes that message gets lost places, just over technicalities or whatever. I don't think you know what I mean?
Yeah, I miss
Mhm.
I miss NA and I miss
Mhm.
AA. I did a when I was living out there. I did AA, CA, and NA.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's all the A's. There's like they have like PA for Pills Anonymous, like HA, like gosh, there's Overeaters Anonymous. There's like
Th-
if there's an A, like a problem, they have a meeting for it out here. It's
Yep,
crazy.
I know,
Mm-hmm.
and I miss that because I live in an area where like there's
Mm-hmm.
only AA.
Yeah.
So, and I even tried to open up a recovery center, like a
Mm-hmm.
meeting center. And my wife and I, is a nonprofit we started. It was the same name as my podcast. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I'm JD, but the podcast is called MJ's Progress Not Perfection. Because that was the name of our meeting center. Like my wife
Yeah.
Mikey is the M, and then I'm the
Oh.
J.
Yeah.
And we had AA, NA, mental health meetings, LGBTQ meetings, all based out of there. But like we were running it on our own money, and we
Mm-hmm.
couldn't afford to keep it going. And then my
Yeah.
wife got sick with MS, so
Um.
that took a toll on us, financially, and she couldn't contribute as much because get out of the house would be really hard for them to get out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's that, I thought that addiction was the worst disease that I could see
Hmm.
until I saw MS take a lot.
Yeah.
So, like right now, they use a chair and they can't really walk without it.
Mm.
So, and they're in recovery too. We're both in recovery. She does recovery dharma.
Okay.
It's like a Buddhist approach to the steps,
Yeah. How cool. Yeah.
and that's online. I think she's in a meeting right now, actually. But yeah, we both have our own recovery, and both stop drinking on the same day,
Mm, that's
which
cool.
was Leap Day of 2020. And I'm the only person I know I've done over 200 of these,
Yeah.
and I haven't had somebody yet tell me Leap Day is their sober day.
That's a special one to land on. That'd be a hard one to get back too. So you got to keep that.
I know. Yep, I know. That's
Hmm.
that's why I haven't drank. I'm pissed my relapse happened, but it's still my alcohol free date. You know what
Yeah.
it like? Someone gave me shit in a group. I forget which group it was. But I listed all. I have four different dates that like are important to me, which is 4/25/18 when I quit opiates, 2/29/20 when I quit alcohol, 4/1/24 when I quit benzos and weed, and 7/13 when I quit gambling.
Hmm.
And I posted this, and somebody commented, "So you're basically saying you're 4 months clean? Good job." It's like, fuck off, dude.
Yeah.
Like, people are so judgmental and shit.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's easy to kind of get stuck, like I said before, like in like the technicalities. I think even at the beginning of like my sobriety, like when I was like, we always talk about like everything's so black and white at the beginning sometimes. Like you get like so gung ho and like doing like basically like the roboting through it that we forget like the purpose of it all. We get so stuck in being right. Like unfortunately, like, taking the drinks and the drugs away, like though are very important and like help me start fixing the problem. Like we all also have like all these like character defects and judgment is like a huge one
Yeah.
everywhere, and it definitely shows up in the room sometimes and can like get the best of some people.
What
But
do
I
you have
think
in
like
your hand?
this my
Yeah.
it's just like two me monkeys. I think I said that right. Two me monkeys. It's French for you're missing from me. Like my mom's side is French, and so like we call like my grandma and grandpa Meme and Pepe, and my Pepe is used to like he's actually an alcoholic, but he was sober for a really long time, and he used to say like he'd have like the different prayers from Alcoholics Anonymous in his like pocket, and he'd say them in French all the time. So anyways, when he passed away, me and my mom went and got tattoos. She got the same thing but with a teardrop like on the inside of her like bicep, and then I got mine on my arm, my lower arm.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It sticks I'm
Yeah, I
like,
have a whole bunch too. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I went to LA with one,
Yeah.
and then I
Yeah.
came home like 5 months later with I think 17.
Yeah.
And my friend is a graffiti artist,
Mm-hmm.
based out of Venice, and she travels all across the world doing graffiti. Like that's her
Ooh, how
full-time
cool.
job.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And she's an amateur tattooist, so she would do tattoos for newcomers for free in her front yard in Venice.
Oh, that's so cool.
So she would do meetings in her front yard every Saturday night at 8.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were a newcomer, you could get a tattoo, and she just wanted a tip for cover the supplies.
Yeah.
And I used to go. I was a meeting junkie when I first got sober. I'm not sure about you,
Yeah.
but like I did like 250 and 90. And
Mm-hmm.
my Saturday, I would go to a noon one in Santa Monica. Then I would go to CA in Culver City. Then I would go to AA in Venice. And then I would end up at Marina Del Rey for 11 p.m.
Yeah. Wow. It's
But
a
I
lot.
wasn't working. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It was, and I was in sober living, and we IOP was Monday through Friday
Okay. Yeah.
for 3 fucking hours each
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, but it gave you the luxury of like diving, deep into all the different meetings and programs that are available to. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
that's definitely cool.
I would go to my nooner at
Mm-hmm.
12 in Santa Monica, and then I would walk about 4 miles to Westwood,
Mm-hmm.
where UCLA is, and I would walk
Okay.
about 4 miles from my noon meeting over to IOP, and I'd be there from 2 to 5 or 2 to 6 or some shit like that. I forget now.
Yeah.
But that was IOP was great, and I learned a lot from it. And
Mhm.
I got into therapy out there for the first time. Do you
Oh
do
yeah.
therapy too?
I just restarted therapy actually like 3 weeks ago. So, because I'm in a program for women going to school because I'm going to school for my bachelor's degree right now. And anyways, they help people from like different backgrounds or whatever. And one of the things that they provide is weekly therapy. So,
That's
yeah.
awesome. I'm a huge fan of therapy.
Yeah, I was like always thinking about doing it, but I didn't have insurance for the longest time. And so I just kind of was like, oh, it's something I'll look into. And then getting into pathways, and then them offering, some mental health stuff. It's been really cool. So I'm like in the beginning phases though. I've only met with my lady like 3 times, but definitely I enjoy it and I'm excited to see like because there's always like things that need to be worked on. And so excited to kind of like work on those things and see what like comes from all of that. A little nervous too, but
Yeah. So let's backtrack again. We went
Mhm.
on a tangent.
Yeah.
You got it. You started with drinking, and it
Mhm.
progressed into Xanax, and that progressed into lower tabs by the time
Mhm.
you were like in high school. When does it escalate again?
Um, well, I mean, I did like a lot of psychedelics and stuff in high school too. So I was doing like a lot of like acid and a lot of ecstasy and stuff. And so like kind of progressed in that sense.
I loved
Um,
acid.
yeah, oh my
Yeah,
God. I loved like 2C, like anything. Like anything that was gonna make me trip, I was super into for a while. We were like super into raves and like all of that for like a good few years. But and then alcohol was like a huge part. I drank a lot. And then I'm trying to think. I had a job. I was working at Lowe's. Gosh, how old was I though? This is probably like right after high school. And trying to think. No, 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 no. Yeah, I was working at Pizza Hut throughout high school, and I got fired from Pizza Hut because my senior year of high school, I'd moved out. I got my own apartment because my mom was going to move back in with my dad, and I was 18, so I was like, I'm not doing that anymore. And so I got an apartment, and I'm like working at Pizza Hut, and I'm like, just basically not showing up for school or work. I'm just getting like loaded all day and night. And I got fired from that job and I ended up losing the apartment. And so I slowed down. So I was like, it was like the first time I'd really like gotten some like consequences. And so I moved back into my mom's house because she's broken up from my dad again by that point. And yeah. And like this is like a point in my life where I was like, I'm just gonna like drink and smoke weed like a lady, you know, like I'm gonna like put the harder stuff down because I'd kind of like done a little bit of meth at that point. Like I was really starting to get introduced some like to some of the harder stuff, you know, and so things were looking a little scary. And I don't know, so I was like successful though for a little bit. Like I was able to like just drink and smoke weed for a few months, you know, and like kind of like pick up from the consequences that I was feeling, you know, like I got the next like good job at Lowe's and, you know, I was able to move out again and back on my feet and I started to feel real good about myself. And so I rewarded myself, you know, and that's when opiates like made a new like re-entrance into my life. And that's when they really overtook everything else. So then it wasn't really about like you just using anymore. It was about, you know, just like staying well quickly into that run. And I was a head cashier and I worked cash office at Lowe's and I was having a hard time affording drugs the way I had been. And it was like the big spike in opioid prices, you know, the inflation that nobody talks about that really hit our community. And a lot of my friends were, you know, making the switch over to heroin and I just like wasn't ready to do that. So I started doing other stuff to afford my fix. So I started stealing from my job
What was
and
your drug of choice then? Was it the Roxy 30s?
yeah, like perk 30s or yeah, like 20s, 15s, whatever I could find. But yeah, definitely Roxy's were it. That and like Dilaudid's. I had just started like with the introduction to like some IV drug use, just a little bit, just for like Dilaudid's, because I was like, I don't know, like in my head the way you had to do them, but so it's like it was like teetering on pretty bad, and so then I started stealing from my job, and I got caught for return fraud, and got into some trouble, and I remember like when I got fired and like walked out to my car by like loss prevention and the store manager like being just like so like humiliated and embarrassed. I just like hated who I was, you know. um I'm sure I was crying because I'm like a baby, and I like got into my car and I just remember feeling so disgusted with myself and like driving home, and the first thing I did was get loaded again, you know, like pick up, you know, just like picked up and I got high and like I
I
just like
got fired for the same thing if it makes you feel any better.
oh yeah, yeah,
Like,
and all of us have now.
well, I was, you know how like cash registers have that slit that you put the
hmm
50 into?
Yeah,
Well, what I would do is I worked at Best Buy
yeah,
and we have those like cardboard, like the plastic, whatever, like Best Buy rewards cards.
yeah.
And, you know, they were like this big and,
hmm
you know, you could bend it in half and break off the top part. But I would stick that in the bottom part of the register and I'd wag it around and it would get money loose and I'd pull it through, or I'd
mm
get double sided tape and I would put it in there real gently and pick money up that way and pull it out of the cash register. And I always used drawers that I never worked on. So when
Yeah.
the drawers were short, my numbers were never attached to that drawer. I got caught for that. What I didn't get caught for, which I also did, was when my dealer bought a new house, I basically gave him everything that he needed for his house: TVs, surround sounds, laptops, routers. He had a bill of like $2,300 and I cashed him out. Like, I hit cash on the register and
hmm
gave him the receipt. And then I did a post void and I voided the transaction like it never happened.
Yeah.
So he had a receipt to get past loss prevention at the door with all of his stuff, but at the end of the day it wasn't going to reflect on our sale at all because of the post void.
Yeah.
So and then he gave me like 40 30s because I owed him money, So he
Mm,
took that off the top, and then he gave me 40 30s to as a thank you for, and which is a shitload for me. Getting 40 30s is $1,000 worth of 30s right there.
mm,
I got, and I owed him a shitload of money, which is why we did that, one time thing. But it helped me out.
mm-hmm.
Um, so you were shooting to lauded? Is that what you said?
Yeah, and then I would like snort perk 30s or whatever. Yeah. And I was doing like where I would go get uh like item numbers from like high priced items because I was the head cashier, and I would just go to drawers and it would make it look like I was doing a drop, and I would just do a return but type in the item number and then do a cash return but then keep the cash. But and like I'd put it in the drop bag, and then as I was like walking to the cash office, I would like just nonchalantly take it out of the drop bag and put it in my pocket. And um anyways, if you type in item numbers on returns, it flags it. And so they were watching me for a long time. So I really thought I had outsmarted the system. And I definitely didn't. Uh, they waited until it was enough money to where they could press charges if they wanted to. Luckily, they didn't. Luckily, they just like parted ways. Um, but
Yeah, they
they,
didn't press charges on me either.
yeah, I was super fortunate because that would have really sucked. But yeah, and at that time it was mainly like perk 30s. I was just like slowly being introduced to like this other side of using, like it was like because like the more you use and like the more you progress, like the people you hang out with are a little bit progress as well. And those were some of the people I was coming around. And like when you couldn't find anything and you could only find like Dilatas or whatever, that started just making a little bit of an introduction into my life. And it went on like this for a while longer. I lost everything again, like I lost like the apartment, and I, was like jumping around from job to job, and I ended up back at my mom's house, and I was like about 22, 23 at the time. And that's really when my family started asking a lot of questions, like where's all your money going? How come you can't keep a job? You know, I had
Some of the
a,
worst questions I have to answer.
yeah, and on my car, I had bought um like a Chevy Equinox or whatever, and so I was behind on my payments, and my car was getting repossessed, and my mom was like just kind of like freaking out, just kind of like what's happening here, and so I told her like, hey, like I have a problem with opiates, like, but don't worry, just gonna like detox here at your house, like I'm just gonna detox in the shower, just give me like a week, I'll be fine. Because at that like point, I really thought like I could see that I did like that the way that I was living was like insane. I could see that most of the people like that I went to high school with, or like I'm from like a smaller town, like most of the people I knew, like though like some of them partied, like they had like progressed in other places in their life, and I just like wasn't, I was like a I guess like just going in a sinking spiral. And I didn't want to keep living like that. I didn't like the consequences, and I really thought that if I could just detox, that I'd be fine. I really thought that my problem was like this just physical dependency that I had to opiates. And if I could just get to the other side of not feeling bad, that I like wouldn't do it anymore, right? And the thing is, and this is like when I started making like a few introductions to a couple state facilities, because I tried to detox, and then I picked up again, and I wound up at a, in the hospital. And so my mom really, that's when she like really stepped in, and she got me into a state facility in Kansas. But I stayed like 3 days or something, and then that's when they're like, okay, let's use insurance and let's get her out of this place. And that's like what led up to my first real treatment center and getting introduced to it was like a dual diagnosis treatment center. So that's when I got my first introduction to like mental health treatment and addiction treatment. And yeah, I was able to put 7 months together in that time. Uh, and then I came back and got loaded again. But
Say you
yeah,
really thought you had it.
I did. Well, cuz like I went to this like beautiful place in Palm Springs the first time. I went out came out here and like I saw my first palm tree, they would take us to see the ocean. I'd never seen the ocean before. My first time was in rehab, and I'm like so landlocked in Kansas. And I but like the best thing is like for the first time in years I got separated from the drink and the drug, like I fully detoxed, and I began to feel a lot better. I wasn't like waking up sick anymore, and I wasn't like waking up, just thinking about how I'm gonna get loaded all day. Like I had like my first like taste of freedom. I really felt better. I I don't know. Like I really thought I was better, and from like a chemical standpoint, like I was, like from a chemical standpoint, I wasn't dependent on these things anymore. But the thing is, and this is why I like Alcoholics Anonymous, but or any 12-step program is, I my head just started picking up like once I got out of treatment and I was like back in the real world and I was like in sober living and I had to have a job and like do like day-to-day things and like life wasn't going my way. I didn't have like a solution to that problem yet. Like I didn't have a solution to this, like maladjustment to life, like this inability to feel comfortable on like the day-to-day. Like I just couldn't handle like life on life's terms and I just felt like inadequate. Like I got like really like quickly into self-pity. Like I'm just like felt um yeah, just like incapable and life no longer felt good. I lost that euphoria that I had found in treatment. Um, and at this point, I was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I didn't think I was like bad enough to be there, if that makes any sense. Like I'd be in the rooms and I felt so separated from everybody. Like I felt like nobody believed that I was a drug addict. Like nobody believed that I was bad enough to, and it's just my head, right? Like it's just me separating me from everybody else. But it was just so loud and it was so believable that it became my reality. And so I'm too bad to be normal, but I'm like not bad enough to be one of these people. And so I separated myself. I didn't get like that community that people find in recovery. I didn't get the peace that people found in recovery. I just like wasn't getting the results that everybody else was getting, and gosh, I just like met misery in sobriety, and if I'm gonna be miserable, I'm gonna be loaded while I do it. Like might as well reap something. If I'm gonna like if my life's gonna suck, I'm gonna have it suck my way.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so that's really what pushed me. Like I think like something broke on my car or something like that. It was just like a regular like Monday or Tuesday. Like I had like no intentions of like getting loaded, but it was just like that final like that straw that broke the camel's back. And I was just like, I'm done. This is dumb. I'm done. I packed up all my stuff and I drove back to Kansas and I got like, and I drove straight through. It's a 24-hour drive. And I think I slept for like an hour in the middle of the day in New Mexico at some truck stop. And then I drove the rest of the way and I got home in the middle of the night and I got loaded that night. Like I'd been home for like long enough to set my bags down. And I thought like I was just gonna like now I know how to do it, right? Like in moderation. I don't want to get addicted, so I'm going to just use, and it's right to opiates is what I went to, and I'm just going to use here and there, and it was like I never stopped, like I never
What did
put
you
it.
pick up first?
It was a perk, I think probably like a perk 15. Like I picked up one, and then before I even left, I was buying like a bunch more. Like I had one paycheck left from this job that I had, and I'd spent like the whole thing. Um, like by the time I left, my homie's house or whatever, and yeah, I mean, it was just like back to, it was like I had never even put it down, and I found instantly that sense of comfort and belonging, that I like didn't find or thought I was missing before, like that's the thing about like using it, it separates me from the rest of the world, but at the same time, like it's like my solution to like every uncomfortability that I have, and it's like from the outsider's perspective, like it doesn't make sense that we're doing this, but to me, like in the moment, like it's the only thing that makes sense, you know. And I'm sure like a lot of people can relate to that. And that's like the baffling part, you know, of addiction is I don't want to hurt the people around me. I knew doing what I was going to do was going to hurt my family and people who love me, but in that moment, it just seemed like that was like the only logical choice that made sense to me. And yeah, I mean, my addiction just got tremendously worse after that. You
Why?
know,
Why? What do you mean by worse? Like, give me an example.
yeah. You know, so I'd gotten a job at Olive Garden. I'm a big waitress bartender. I've like every place in Hutchinson, Kansas. I've every restaurant I've worked at multiple times probably. But and my dad owns a couple rentals, and so I moved into one of his rentals. Because at this point they don't know that I'm getting loaded; they just think I'm back to be with family, you know. And they're so proud of me, and I'm, you know, I'm using that to my advantage. And then I met a guy, and he had just gotten like a $40,000 disability settlement. So he was the one, you know. Just kidding. I
Mhm.
really did like him too, but that helped, right? And he was addicted to heroin and meth, and I had used I had never used heroin, but I'd used meth before. And like the friends that we hung out with did a lot of meth, and so I just dove in head first, like without even blinking. Like this just seemed to be the next lo- logical step, I guess. I don't know. And quickly I was in IV. I was addicted to heroin, meth, and cocaine, and I was shooting all three every day for like probably 2 years. Because this like timeline to get to this point probably took about 6 months, maybe, and then about 2 years we were together ish, like give or take a couple months, and he was like in and out of jail. He was a terrible alcoholic, which is ironic I'm saying that, but he would drink like a liter or whatever, like those big bottles of KD every day. Like I'd get a small bottle for him and he would put a straw in it so he could chug that one just to throw it up, and then he would drink on the other one for the rest of the day. And so he was be in and out of the hospital too because his body was like literally shutting down. He's having seizures and stuff all the time. This is like how we were getting towards the end, and you know, like we blew through that 40,000 in like a couple of months, you know, and we were just so strung out, you know. Like I don't know how bad he was before that, but I know that both of us were terrible after. And you know, I gosh, I'd move people in and out of my house to like help pay for rent, you know. It just became just like a revolving door for drug dealers, and you know, like whatever thing I could barter to get high or stay high, like I did, you know. And I really used and abused my dad for a while, and took advantage of like the home, and you know, I wouldn't pay him for months on end or whatever, but he wouldn't evict me, and he'd show up eventually and yell at me in the front yard or something. But anyways, but anything I could barter, you know. And that's what I would do. And so it just, my house just became a revolving door for a lot of criminal activity, you know, just like a lot of like chaos. And I remember like I overdid it one night on cocaine, and I like really thought I was gonna die, and that scared me straight for a little bit. You know, I like put the hard stuff down maybe for a couple weeks. I still like drinking and smoking weed. But then, but like maybe a week and a half later, like I pick up again, you know. And uh, my ex, he at that time we broke up eventually. But he was like in and out of jail, right? And eventually he went to jail where he had to stay for a little while, and so I no longer had him anymore. And I don't know, like for me, like when I'm out there getting loaded, it's nice to have a companion, especially a man, so you can feel like a little safer or whatever. And so I like lost like that level of stability, if that's the right word for it. But um, like I was really kind of on my own, and I'd lost my, I couldn't keep a job at this point. My dad had kicked me out at this point. Um, I just, you know,
Did your parents know what was going on at this point?
yeah, they were definitely aware of it, but I have a couple uncles. I have one that's sober and one that's not sober, and so like my family like knew that if I wasn't gonna get sober until I was ready. They did, like my parents weren't together, but they would talk about me, of course, and they would yell at each other for enabling me. Then they'd both kind of do it or whatever, and I took full advantage though. And so they finally got to the point where they were both done. I had used and abused them. My mom, she got hurt really bad. Gosh, it's probably been like 7 years now. And I remember I went and stayed with her for a little while after that. And I'm just stealing her pain pills. Like I'm supposed to move in to help take care of the house because like her back is terrible. She's like, there's like days where she can't move. And here I am supposed to be like helping like take some of the burden, like clean and all the things I promised, right? So I'd have a place to stay. And I'm just stealing the one thing that makes her able to move. And so eventually, like she's like, you got to get out. And then that's when I'm like in my car in hotel rooms and just I have nothing going for myself at this point. I'm lucky to shower at this point. And that's when my friend Lil Mitchell started reaching out and just asking, like, hey, like, are you okay? Like, can I please help you? And eventually I answered and I was like, actually, yeah, like, I do need some help. And I
Were
remember,
you
like,
working? Were you working when you were living in motels and shit?
mm-mm, no. I remember just like I was just stealing a lot. I was like stealing stuff out of people's backyards and pawning it. And then gosh, I'd like break into my mom's house. Like I stole my stepsister's money. Like she's like 11. Um just like whatever slimy shit, pawning anything that I can get my hands on just to help pay for the like when I could stay in a hotel. But a lot of times I stayed in my car because I had my car still. And then yeah, but I was in a hotel at the time, actually from the money I stole from my stepsister. It was like her life savings, right? So like 300 bucks or whatever, and just yeah, just whatever. It didn't matter. Like I would like know like these things were like wrong or like bad, but I just get high and forget about it. Like in my head, I'm like doing what I have to do, don't you know? So yeah. So I mean that's what it looked like at the end. It's like pretty, pretty gnarly. Just like rotten. And I was just like I was ate up and just strung out. And I remember like the lady calling me to do the assessment for detox because I got like scholarshiped into detox basically and got I had lived at this sober living when I was out here last time. It's called Thy Will Be Done and I I was like, just like this lady just asked me questions like you are, right? Like my history and stuff. And, I'm telling her how I lived at That'll Be Done. And like she happened to like know the owner, like they were like friends or whatever. And I don't know, it was like all kind of like a God shot in a sense. Like, and, and I don't know why, but like I remember like her telling me like I need to get on the plane because they'd paid for my plane ticket, and she like pulled some strings to do that for me because otherwise I wasn't going to make it out there. And she just told me like you need to get on this plane, like you're going to die. And I'm sure a bunch of people have told me that, but it was like just like when this lady told me, it was like the first time like I really like heard it or
Listen,
something or listened, yeah. And I was like, fuck, I'm gonna die. Like it just like hit me like if I keep on like living the way that I was, I'm sure I was just teetering on death, you know? Because I mean, we get, I mean, it's crazy, you know, like how some people can like be out there and get loaded for a really long time and like not, you know, not die, but like then there's like some people it's just like instantly, and you just never know, right? Like we never know when our last shot's gonna be, you know, and I was like messing with a little bit of fentanyl at this time because fentanyl had just kind of made a introduction to the Midwest. Probably like the
Is
last like 8 months of my using.
was xylazine out there yet, or is it out there yet?
I don't know if it's out there now, but it wasn't whenever I
No,
was.
yeah, it definitely wasn't then. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure because I had heard that xylazine made its way to Denver. And I'm not sure if it was making its way west and went to Kansas or not because I'm from South Jersey, right outside of
Yeah.
Philly, and xylazine has been huge for the last 5 years in Philadelphia.
I have
Like,
not heard of that, but I don't know. I mean, I would assume if it's made it to Colorado, like we're east of Colorado, one state east of Colorado. So I'm sure it's out there. I'm sure it's in like the bigger cities. I'm from Hutchinson, Kansas, which is like the most center point of the United States, fun fact. But we're like 40,000 people, and then it's like 45 minutes to the next city, which is Wichita, which is like 250,000, and that's the biggest city in Kansas, right? Is Wichita. So, um, if it's in Wichita, it takes a little while to like. Sometimes you have to like travel to Wichita. I remember like going to pick up heroin and stuff. Like we had to drive 45 minutes to Wichita a lot of times to be able to pick up black, and so like in these smaller towns it takes a little bit for it to trickle in. But I remember like towards the end getting a lot of press pills, and there's like a lot of press fentanyl coming going around or whatever, and which I was fine with. I felt it's so sick, but I was like, I'm getting more bang for my buck, you know? And but you know, when you're getting loaded, that's all you're thinking about. And now it's like the epidemic of like a lot of people are dying from it, so now it's really scary or whatever. But gosh, you know, I got out just in time because I mean, now you never know what you're going to end up with. And that was really just starting whenever I was towards the end of my last run. So,
yeah, xylazine is horse tranquilizer.
okay. Okay. I've never been offered it, but I'm not saying it's
Yeah,
not yeah, I don't know.
it eats away at your skin,
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
and like that's what there's no more heroin in Philadelphia.
Mm.
There's only fentanyl and xylazine left, but there's no real heroin in Philly.
I tell people if you say your drug of choice is heroin, you aged yourself because it's not a drug of choice anymore. I help run That'll Be Done the Sober Living because I ended up back there. And, you know, like when I first came in there and people, you know, they're putting down their drug of choice, it was like heroin, heroin, heroin. Now it's fentanyl, 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 fentanyl. You know, like it's kind of like the Gen Z to millennial thing that ages you. If you, if you say heroin was your drug of choice, you're definitely older. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, but fentanyl's so cheap, so it's just taken over the market, unfortunately.
yeah, it's everywhere.
Hmm.
And fentanyl just hit your area on your way out.
Yeah, I would say like probably like the last 6 months to a year. I watched it kind of like sprinkle in to really start to flood in towards the end there. Um, but it would be like it wasn't like anybody was out looking for fentanyl, you know, like you just came across it. And now people are out looking for fentanyl, you know, like so that would be like the big change. But yeah, it'd be like a surprise most of the time because people aren't always honest about what they're selling you. And so I'd be like, "Oh, this is fentanyl," you know, like so really that's kind of how it was. But
So I was going to ask you what you do for your recovery these days.
these days, I still do a lot of Alcoholics Anonymous. I sponsor women, and I I don't go to as many meetings as I used to because I'm a full time college student right now and I work full time. So, but I go to like at least two meetings, sometimes three a week. And but I have like a bunch of sponsees, and that's really what keeps me the most busy are those ladies. So, um, and then the sober living I went through, I lived there for 2 years and I house managed for like a year and a half. And then the lady who owns it, she got pregnant and started her family. And she reached out to me because I kept coming back after I left. I'd come every Saturday as alumni to the house meetings. And so she was like, hey, like I'm going to go on maternity leave. Do you mind taking over for a few months? And so, of course, I was like, absolutely, whatever you need from me. And here we are 3 years later. And, I'm still doing it. And she gets to, now she's pregnant again. She's really been able to like, just focus, like she's a puppy and about to have two babies. And she's really been able to just focus on raising our family because she has 11 years coming up on 12 on New Year's. Um, so she gets to kind of enjoy this next, she keeps calling it like the third chapter, like she's had the ability to live three lives in one lifetime. And the first life was getting loaded and living like that. The second life was getting sober and living in that freedom. And this third life is being a mom and a wife and just embracing, this chapter of her life. And she's done so much for me. She was just a huge impact. Like she brought me in, I didn't have like a job or any money, and she brought me in with no rent money and like let me sleep on the couch and let me find a job and pay her back. And she helped me get my first car. And so now to be able to be of service to her is really cool. And service to the sober living, I really love. I This morning, I went and did a test and then for school, and then I drove to the sober living and do the house meeting there. And I get to be like a part of those girls' lives the way that she was for me. So it's probably like the coolest part, the coolest thing I do regularly still, is stay really involved with that house. So um,
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. I just moved into my studio, and there was a cat that was living outside the sober living that was like just showed up like with like skin and bones, and I was just able to adopt the cat, the cat. Like I feel like my whole life's always been centered around that sober living, and just I don't know, like one of the huge blessings. So
I do the same thing with cats. I want to save all of them.
yeah,
And I live in an apartment complex. My wife and I have two cats,
yeah.
Scuba and Diver. Um,
Oh,
but we call Diver Plops because he's so chunky, he just plops down everywhere.
yeah.
And I smoke cigarettes still, and I
Mm-hmm.
go outside to smoke a cigarette, and there's this stray cat. They get out, and I
Mm-hmm.
find out it's an outdoor cat that
Yeah.
lives in one of the apartments.
Mm-hmm.
But he's been outside, and whenever I'm out there smoking, I hear meow, and he runs up to me and rolls right on his back for me to pet his
Mm-hmm.
belly. Like I
Oh.
almost pushed our interview because I was petting him so much earlier.
That's funny.
Like I picked him up and I was petting him, and he's one of those cats. And when I lived in West LA, there was, and I was in treatment before I went into sober living. We There was a stray cat that would always come, and we named him Charlie, and he would always come over for food. And
Mm.
we come to find out he was just an outdoor cat that would just go from place to place for food.
Smart cat.
Smart. So, well, I know you're busy, Taylor. I appreciate you coming on. I think
Yeah.
it's awesome what you're doing right now. With what are you going to school for?
I'm going for my bachelor's for marketing. So,
Okay,
yeah. Yeah.
and then plus you're working in the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I do the sober living, and then yeah, I work at a marketing office and go to school for marketing, but who knows? Who knows where I'll end up. So
Yeah, well,
yeah.
keep doing what you're doing. I'll talk to you later.
All right, you two have a good day. Thank
Bye.
you.